The log wheels are a more precise alternative to our primary color wheels. While lift, gamma, and gain affect broad overlapping ranges, the shadow, midtone, and highlight controls are more focused and targeted. The log controls were originally designed for log encoded footage such as S-log or C-log, but they work just as well on normalized footage when you want to push specific tonal zones without using masks or qualifiers. Hey guys, JMO here. Welcome back to another tutorial. Let's get into it. So you can see we've got shadow, midtone, highlights, and offset. Now let's just compare what happens when I make a change on the shadow. Let me just bring the shadow down. You can see that we're only affecting the shadow areas and we're locking off at about 384. So there's no change on the midtone, no change on the highlight. We're locked in and we're just affecting shadows. You can see how this is different to our lift, where the lift actually lifts the whole image down and up because we're pivoting around a different point here, versus our log where we're pivoting around this 384 mark. Now let's go to our midtones. You can see now we're just affecting the midtone region. So we're kind of locked in about 300 and then we're locked in about there, about 550, 560 I guess. We're not affecting the highlights or the shadows at all. We're just focused in on that middle region. And then if we go to our highlight, you can see now we've locked off at around 512 and we're just affecting that upper region of the footage. And then we go to our offset, and then we can see that our offset is pretty much the same as our offset in our primary color wheels, where we've got a linear change across all areas of the shot. Shadow, midtones, and highlights all getting affected the same amount. So that's what's happening there. So you can see the difference between our color wheels and our log wheels. In our log wheels, we also have these down ranges and our up ranges. So you'll see them here, down range and up range. Now, let me just make that shadow adjustment again. And you can see we locked off at around 384 and we've made the adjustment on the shadow end of our image. Now, just keep an eye here where we've locked off. If I lower this down range, you can see that I'm now pushing down into the shadows and I'm isolating a smaller area of the shadows. So if I really just want to affect the darkest, blackest parts of the image, I could drop my range right down, and when I make a shadow adjustment, I'm just impacting the very, very darkest. So you can see there, it's just kind of locked off around 128. If I increase the down range and I make my shadow adjustment, you can see that I'm now lifting that down range and I'm way up into my midtones. So I'm actually about 512 here. So there's going to be a bigger sweeping change across all shadows and all midtones. So this really allows us to get in granular and really target and isolate specific tonal ranges when we're using our log wheels. Now, let me just reset that. Let me make an adjustment on my highlights here. So if I bring down the highlights, if I want a softer roll off on the highlights, now I can use my up range to adjust where that change is made along the spectrum of midtones and highlights. So you can see as I lower that up range, I'm going right down into my mids and into my shadows. If I lift the up range, now I'm pushing back up into more of a isolated area in the highlights. So if I want to really just adjust, the brightest parts of my image, I can lift up that up range and then lower highlights or increase highlights, and I'll just affect the very brightest. So this is a great way to start to get very detailed, granular into specific tonal ranges, and that's what we use these down range and this up range for. Now, midtones, you can imagine what's going to happen. If I lower the down range, we'll go down into the shadows, and then if I lift the up range, we'll go up into the highlights. So now we can impact a broader mid-tone range while keeping off the darkest blacks and the brightest whites, and we can lock off and then start to change the midtones. Just knowing what these controls do can really allow us to adjust things like exposure and dial in the right amount of contrast into a shot by knowing how to use these. Now let's quickly touch on the color here. If I make a shadow change here, I know that we've isolated the shadows. Now if I add some blue into the shadows, I know that I am only going to add blue into that range. You can see that I'm adding blue into these dark areas of the shot, but anything up here it's staying neutral. So there's no blue getting added to this part. Now, if I lower the down range, you can see I can adjust where that gets added. So let me lift up this one. So now, you know, I've got more blue further up into the midtones versus this, where I've pushed the blue down into the darkest shadows. So the range also works when we're adding color. So keep that in mind. You know, if I really just want to add, say, a blue into the darkest shadows, I could lower the down range and then add the blue. So now, same with things like our midtones and our highlights. If I add blue into the midtones, it's going to be more in the middle area. Let me just adjust that, and I can add the blue just more into the midtones. You can see the RGB dropper here. I've got more blue than red and green in the midtones. And then if I go to the whites, no blue. Go to the blacks, no blue. So that is just affecting the midtone area. And I can, same again with the range, I can adjust how deep into the shadows and how far up into the highlights we add that blue. So, and then finally, we obviously have highlights. So we know what's going to happen here. Our highlights are going more blue, and then no blue in the midtones and shadows. So the log wheels are great. They're a great way to isolate tonal zones, especially if we want to add color into those specific tonal zones, or we want to change our luminance values in those tonal zones. So that's our log wheels. So you can see how our log wheels are great for getting into specific adjustments in those very specific tonal ranges. We can really isolate off our shadows, our highlights, or into our mids. And, you know, when it comes to real world footage and when you're editing real world footage, you know, if you've got, say, some talent with skin tones in the scene and you want to make adjustments to just those skin tones without impacting your shadows or your highlights, you can jump into your log wheels, get into your midtones and start making tweaks. And you can be confident that whatever color hue changes or luminance changes you make in those midtone regions, you won't be impacting your shadows or your highlights. The better you know your tools in DaVinci and your color page, the better your color grading is going to get. You're going to know exactly which tool to take out and how to apply it on your videos. So hopefully these videos help. There's PDF docs linked in the description below. So if you want to download those, they're completely free and they just go along with this course material because, you know, for me, if I read something and watch a video, I'll just internalize it and understand it better. So I recommend you jump in and grab those. All right, thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video.